to. There was no official governor's residence until Walter Edge. So yeah, they lived wherever they wanted to. And it was usually in other states, they lived in the capital, somewhere in the capital, where ours never was in the capital. And I think at the time there were only 8 or 9 other states that didn't have a governor's residence. So it was really rare. Yeah. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our civics discussion of E.B. White on democracy. And to kick us off and get us started this evening, I'm just going to do a little quick housekeeping, and that will just be that we welcome you to participate in any way you feel you'd like to. At the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen, you'll see a little smiley face with a plus sign on it, and that's for reactions. So if you'd like to speak or you like to add something to the conversation, we just ask that you indicate in some way so we don't all talk at once. Bob Alsan has a thumbs up. Okay, so yeah, you can do thumbs up, you can raise your hand, whatever little icon you feel you want to do so that I can see that you'd like to participate. But we can't all just chat at once because then it loses its whole purpose. So we'll do that. This is being recorded, so we'll have a recording for you afterwards. It will send out to everyone the link for the recording. And that's pretty much the housekeeping. Just everybody be respectful of one another, and that's part of what we're going to talk about. So as we kick things off, I am going to introduce to you the new board chair of Morven Museum and Garden, Ms. Liza Morehouse.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and welcome everyone again. I'm thrilled to be here. It's very exciting to have our inaugural civics book group. And as Debbie mentioned, I'm currently the chair of the Board of Trustees of Morven Museum and Garden. And I welcome you and I thank you for joining this inaugural book group. There are many book groups around, and we're very pleased that you have chosen to come to this one. We're especially grateful to John Baxter for agreeing to moderate and lead our discussion, because it's so important to have good leadership. And I would like to give you just a little brief note about how we came to be here and how we came to inaugurate this book group. Debbie, as you know, may or may not know, is our curator of education and public programs, and she leads regular meetings of our education and public programs committee as we follow along in our strategic plan and forge our way through new programs and new endeavors. And at one meeting, 2 of our members, Jane Milrod and our current co-chair, Lisa Ullman, put forward the idea of a book group. And Debbie and we all knew it couldn't be just any book group because there are so many. And also, given our strategic plan, we knew that we needed to have a focus that really connected to Morven. And so about the same time, Morven and indeed the whole region and the world lost our longtime benefactor and honorary trustee, Betty Wold Johnson. And Betty had a lifelong passion for and interest in civics in general and the Constitution in particular. And she always had a copy of the Constitution and the Declaration with her and would wave it to make a point. Or if she wanted you to read it, she'd pull it out and show you the part that it's in here, just read it in here. And she'd often give you the pamphlet. So following our strategic plan and our hearts, we decided to focus our book group on civics in honor of Betty Wold Johnson. And then we needed to find an able and approachable history expert to get us going and lead us. And we found John Baxter. He answered the call. And so here we are. So with many thanks and congratulations to Debbie for herding all the cats, and to Lisa and Jane for planting the seed, and Colleen Goggins, our committee co-chair, and Lisa, other co-chair, for bringing us to completion. And with many grateful thanks to John for your help and guidance, time and effort, I welcome you to Morven Museum and Garden's inaugural civics book group and hope you enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Liza. Very, very nice. So we've now spotlighted John Baxter, and I have the honor of getting things a little bit further along the way by beginning with, I'm going to share the screen here for a moment and just formally share our civics book group, E.B. White's On Democracy. I'm not sure how many of you have actually read the book or have received the list of topics that we're going to cover tonight, but we are going to have a moderated discussion with John Baxter. And who is John Baxter? Well, here's a little more about John Baxter. Liza beautifully described him as the man who answered our call. He answered the call of teaching about 30 years ago, and he was recently retired. And in a newspaper article, he was quoted as saying, "History gives meaning to who we are on a variety of levels, a meaning to life." And a man who thinks that way is exactly the way Morven thinks with its new strategic plan, in that we want to give people and share in the way they think about the world and think about their civic responsibility and how they handle things in their daily lives. So, Mr. Baxter, are you ready to begin?
We're ready.
Tell us what civics is.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Liza, and thank you, Debbie, for your kind words. It's really quite a pleasure to be here tonight in my own study, but with you virtually. Yeah, civics, keeping in mind that this is a civics book club, it's important to be focused on that definition, that it's the study of the rights and obligations of citizens in society. So tonight, as we're going through this book on democracy, which is not technically a civics book, but we'll be looking for, and as Debbie and I pulled out quotes from the book, we're focusing on this definition of rights and obligations of citizenship and looking for quotes that would inform us as to either of those, the rights or obligations. It's again an honor to be here. Just a little bit more about myself. My love is American history. I had an undergraduate degree in history. I decided to continue my education by going to law school in large measure because of my love of the Constitution and constitutional history of the United States, including the changes made in the Civil War. But after law school, ultimately, history being my passion, I wanted to live, breathe, and teach history. So I entered teaching at high school, ultimately at Princeton High School for about 20 years. In addition to history, I taught government and politics, AP government and politics, to Princeton seniors. And I really approached that class as the last opportunity to shape good citizenship attitudes and behaviors in our seniors, including being able to discuss controversial topics, to hear opinions, various opinions students may not agree with, but to hear them with respect and to respond in a respectful and responsible way. So coming back to civics is a real pleasure. So tonight, I hope everyone has the copy of their book nearby. We'll be going through the essays and the poems and songs, or poems rather, and letters that we put down as required reading for tonight. So while we will be looking at specific quotes that we've selected, there certainly will be an opportunity for you to bring up other passages from those selected essays, and perhaps at the end of the night, we'll even open it up to other essays that you may have been a little disappointed that were not part of the required readings for tonight. I think that's it. I think we can move on to our next slide. We're going to be focusing on the introduction by John Meacham and quotes that we took from the introduction before we get into the actual essays. So I think we have 4 quotes from the introduction. And I think these are good quotes to get us started, not only in terms of E.B. White's thoughts, but on why we're here this evening. First of all, I think Meacham kind of lays down a challenge to us, saying that White's work is so extraordinary that it repays our attention decades after his death, which was in 1975, or 1985 rather. I should add that this Friday, October 1st, will be the anniversary of E.B. White's death. But I think it's even more important to think about when these essays were written, 1934 to 1976, and whether or not you feel that your attention to this book, to these essays and our discussion tonight is really repayment for your attention. I hope that you find that it is. But looking at those dates, 1934 to 1976, some 42 years, that covers 6 presidencies from FDR to Nixon, and obviously some very hard times, challenging times in the United States, which will inform and give us a historical context for E.B. White's essays. The next 3 quotes are not quotes of Meacham, but rather quotes of E.B. White selected by Meacham for his introduction. And I'll just briefly read those and then say a few things and then open it up to discussion. I have really just one question for all of you. That'll be the question for the night, which is, what are your thoughts? And I hope everyone will find some thoughts that they've wished to share with us. So in this land, the citizens are still invited to meet for discussion, to dissent, as well as to agree to enjoy education in all subjects. And indeed, this book group is living proof of the truth of that statement by E.B. White. And again, just when you share your ideas, your thoughts, I hope you will not hesitate, even if you feel that you are dissenting from the ideas of E.B. White or from any of the other participants. The next quote, "A democracy cannot survive merely by being well informed," as E.B. White called it, news drunk in that particular essay. It must be contemplative and wise. And I think by sharing your opinions, your thoughts, that will help us all to move from just being well informed to perhaps a little closer to some wisdom. So there's kind of a responsibility or an obligation of citizenship right there as well. And finally, to hold America in one's thoughts is like holding a love letter in one's hand. It has so special a meaning. Okay, I thought the quote was cut off there. So I will open it up there as Debbie gave the directions if you want to participate and share some ideas just on those first quotes.
Sarah Ringer has a comment, so I'm going to ask her to unmute. Sarah, what would you like to share with us?
I didn't read the whole book, just the suggested passages that would be focused on this evening. And I was struck by how universal and timeless his writings were. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, there are so many, as we were selecting the quotes again, there are so many that we could have easily brought in because they are, like you said, timeless, and there's nothing new under the sun. I think is another idea that comes to mind in reading this book.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add is that he seems to very quickly get to the heart of the matter, the point he's trying to make. He doesn't use florid language or anything like that. He just seems to put his finger on what he's trying to say.
Yeah. And he uses humor in many ways very effectively.
Yes, he does.
And I was struck by how early on in some of his essays, he spoke of we. He used that oftentimes saying we. I don't think he was just speaking for the New Yorker, although maybe that was part of his reason for doing that. But I thought it just brought you into his essays in a very, very nice, powerful way.
Good point.
And I see Liza Morehouse has her hand up. Liza, would you unmute and share with us what you'd like to add?
I was just thinking about, I heartily endorse what Sarah said about being so sort of universal and timeless. It is remarkable how much of this applies through many different sort of eras of political turmoil, because there always seems to be political turmoil. But that's, I think, the nature of democracy. But interestingly, one of the things he does with his language, I think, has to do with the fact that he's also a children's book writer. He writes with great gentility. He's and again, there's no florid language, as you pointed out, and also it's warm and comfortable and understandable language, even when it's sophisticated vocabulary. It's still inviting and not off-putting, even when he's being firm about something or trying to express a sort of a negative feeling. But his language and the fact that he writes, I think, for children had a lot to do with how approachable his work is.
Great point. Martha Otis has her hand up. Martha, what would you like to add? And just need to unmute yourself there. You just need to unmute, Martha.
Oh, well,
There you go.
what he writes is so lovely, and we're in a very unlovely time. And I hate to think what he would have made of the misinformation and the hysteria and the lies, the mess that we're in. It doesn't seem to fit his idea of, discussion, dissent, as well as to agree. I mean, we're over the top, and it's very hard to tolerate and deal with. And so he's a splash of fresh air. Now that doesn't make sense, but anyway, you know what I mean. He's, it sort of makes me nostalgic and long for a time when he could write these things, because, it's not exactly timeless. It's the way I'd like time to be, but it's not. I hope you can hear me. I should
Oh,
put
yeah,
in my
we
earphones.
can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
I'm lamenting his time. I always loved his writing for children and the New Yorker. He, gave me a sense of the world will continue. I mean, we were terribly worried. I think we thought the bomb was, I think as children, we were hiding, not hiding, but ducking under our desks and wearing dog tags. Now, I wasn't reading E.B. White at that time, but I mean, we've been through terrible, terrible times, but it feels like we're in another terrible time. And news drunk takes on a new meaning in this time. But
John, do you have something to comment to that related to the history of when E.B. White was writing some of these things?
Well, I would say, I think it's just in one of his essays, it may be Bedfellows, but maybe not. No, I think it's in Freedom, where he does actually interact with other people, right? And he describes comments being made to him by other citizens that really take him aback. And so I think, he was living, as a number of you have mentioned already, living in tough times, just as we're going through tough times. And yet his optimism, his faith comes through, his faith in democracy comes through loud and clear. So I think, and we'll be having some more quotes later on that touch upon this. I think we can, take some some hope, some from that, that he made it through those tough times. And I think possibly what gets the country through those tough times is holding on to that hope and that optimism. But yeah,
I'm
but he
sorry.
certainly had in freedom when he's interacting with other people. It reminded me of what we might experience today.
Thank you, John. So Carrie, you have something you'd like to share, if you would unmute?
Yes, just this briefly. Hi. I absolutely loved the selections that were underscored. I read all of those. And I hadn't read E.B. White maybe at all for decades. Not at all. I was aware of him, Elements of Style. I was aware of Charlotte's Web, but I hadn't read him as we did here. And to pick up on what was just said by Baxter, and in contrast to what was said prior, E.B. White took us through many, many very, very difficult times. What is more difficult than all those decades he took us through, whether it was pre-war, World War II, my God, the McCarthyism, civil rights issues. I loved that, and I loved his when he was from the particular to the universal, when he took the universal to the individuals with whom he interacted, letter to the editors and poetry. I really love this as a choice. It was a wonderful inaugural choice. And I don't know that I would have ever looked at it until absent this. And I guess many are. I'm a great fan of John Meacham, and what a splendid introduction, and that he grabbed so much directly from White's own writings that that we in fact paid more attention to. So I thank very much, and I look forward to continuing these.
Thank you so much. So I have two more hands up. Holly, did you have something you wanted to add? And if so, please unmute. Did you have something? Because we can't hear you.
A lot of it, he premises, has to be based on an informed population who does their homework, who listens to both sides, who writes letters to the editor. And that's what we don't have today. People are turn a deaf ear, or people are so on one side or the other, they're not listening to each other. So it's probably happened before, but it seems really scary right now. So.
Thank you, Holly. Sarah, did you have something else you wanted to add? You can unmute.
Yes, I wanted to comment on what John said about the hope that infused E.B. White's writings. And I agree, there's a hopefulness, there's a positiveness. But when he was writing, things were not as divisive in our country like they are now. And I think with things so partisan, it's hard to find that hope. And when I glance at the quotes that are on the screen, and the second one says, "In this land, the citizens are still invited to meet for discussion, to dissent as well as agree, to enjoy education in all subjects." And going back to what Holly just said, I don't know if people are lazy or they're just too busy, or what the problem is that I think feeds this divisiveness, that people believe ridiculous things about partisan issues, whether it's political issues or the vaccines or whatever. And I think it goes back to ignorance, meaning not being well informed. But I wish we had the political atmosphere now that was present during E.B. White's day, when there was reason for hope. People, politics has always been taboo at the dinner party table, but more so than ever, I guess. So
John, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I would. I certainly understand. And I would say this. History is written by the victors. And the fact is that through those difficult times, we survived and we thrived. And in fact, in the 1950s, when E.B. White is writing, he reminded me of the historians who were writing at that time. And they were known as a group, they were known as the consensus historians, which were a group of historians that the consensus was that the United States was fundamentally sound and things were good and things would be good. There was a certain optimism included in that. The historians that would follow in the 1960s were the historians that focused on the people who were not a part of the telling of history up to that time, which fit in with more of the culture of the 1960s. But I think we shouldn't look back on this time and assume that it was that much different than what we're living through today. I certainly understand all of the comments regarding the difficulties that we're facing today. But I think there's also some lines in E.B. White's writings, not necessarily ones that we'll be looking at tonight, that, man, make it sound like they were dealing with many of the same issues, certainly politically and at home as well as abroad.
So we do want to move past the introduction a little bit, but I just want to take one more question. Holly, did you want to have something to add to what we just said? You just need to unmute.
I'm trying. Okay. Our country depends on things to bring us together, like World War II or September 11th. COVID should have brought us together, but it didn't. It tore us further apart.
Interesting point.
And we'll be looking at Bo Carter a little later on, and you know, there were a lot of people who were not united behind the war effort, or even behind the New Deal and the efforts to get out of the Great Depression. But I would like to just break from what I said would be my one and only question. And I think it's, you know, it's been great discussion so far. Just to look at that last quote on the screen from the introduction about America having so special a meaning. And just would like, does anyone want to share as to what they think is the special meaning of America? And I'll start just by saying, when I read that, it reminded me of a speech that Margaret Thatcher gave in 1991, where she actually said that she believed the people of the United States, as well as Europe, did not fully appreciate how special America is. And she went on to say that European countries will never fully understand America because America is a country founded upon a philosophy, while all of their nations are founded upon a history.
Jill Barry, did you want to share with us about that? We just need to
Sure,
unmute.
and just reacting to that quote, John, in some of the writings that, you know, some of the essays we read for tonight, that the relationship with both democracy and America is a very personal relationship, and one that as individuals, he is charging us to be active participants in, you know, much like a love affair. So that's sort of my takeaway to that.
Thank you. That was great. So I moved our screen ahead to from freedom, September 1940. Interesting time period, right? September 1940 was not, well, go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, it's 1 year from the beginning of World War II in Europe with the invasion of Poland in September of '39. And it's about 3 months after the fall of France. And the Battle of Dunkirk. So it was indeed some dark times. And I think that's what he is referring to there, although it goes a little bit beyond. In that first quote, when he says, the least a man can do at such a time is to declare himself and tell where he stands. Certainly there was a debate going on in the United States as to whether or not to enter the war. And then also from Freedom, the quote, a man's free condition is of two parts. He mentions the first part being the animal in a plant dwelling on a planet, but then the second being the practical liberties he enjoys as a privileged member of human society, which is more generally understood, more widely admired, more violently challenged and discussed. So open it up to thoughts on those quotes.
We have no hands raised at this time. Shall we move on to the next one?
This is Carrie. I'll just jump in here that, of course, that first quote there, of course, the least we all can do at all times is to declare ourselves. Where do we stand? What matters? Is it difficult sometimes one-to-one in person with those 180 degrees from our values, from our beliefs? It certainly is. I'm a lot braver online with strangers and a lot more direct than I am in person, but we are in settings, we choose to be in settings where we're not surrounded by those who spurn our values, who disregard our treasured understanding of freedom and responsibility. So I love thinking about all of this. I love that we're reading this and exploring it together. I'm escaping from online, which I probably shouldn't. Well, I proudly said I said, I'm leaving now. I'm going to go discuss White's On Democracy with a group. So, pride of sharing our ideas, our thoughts, our hopes, values.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. So shall we move on to our next?
I just to add to that, when he from that essay, you understand that he's not only speaking about the debate over whether or not to enter the war, but he was also upset about the growing anti-Semitism in the United States, and quite taken back by how some were just accepting that instead of speaking out against it. And certainly when it comes to issues of race in the United States today, those sometimes uncomfortable subjects given the company that we might find ourselves in, declaring yourself is one of those obligations of citizenship that I think comes through in this essay.
And I'm sorry, I missed Liza. Liza has your hand up. Can you please share?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the considerations is with all of this, and in the previous part of the discussion as well, is that information and news moves at a much more rapid pace than it did in White's time. In one of the SATs in bed, having time to carefully craft an essay, and then it's going to be published, and then it's going to be read, and then it's going to be responded to. Now, you say something, part of it is taken and put on a meme, and 1 million people have said you are sludge and should be eliminated from the planet before you even get home and park your car in the garage. So I just think the speed with which news and attention are moving has changed the dynamic of the ability and willingness for people to declare themselves. I think people are much more guarded because it's so much more threatening in some ways if there's people against your point of view.
Historically, John, how do you feel about that? That, news traveling, we can compare it, throughout history, right?
Oh, yes, and we're certainly living through a new era. But so too was E.B. White when some of his earlier essays with regard to radio.
Right, we talk about that in one of the passages.
Yeah, but now everyone basically has a microphone and can reach millions of people. So things have changed. And I thinking of that essay, it would be interesting, as someone said earlier, to see what E.B. White would think of that today. because he certainly felt that those who, I believe in that essay, he makes the point that those who have the microphone and reach millions, yeah, as opposed to those who just speak from a soapbox, the speech is equally entitled to the same protections. I'm not so sure we would feel the same way.
We want to move to the next one, or does anyone else have a comment they want to share? Have I missed anyone? Okay,
I would just say real fast about the last quote there. I think what struck me about that is how when it comes to human rights, when it comes to liberties, they're understood, admired, while at the same time violently challenged and discussed. And I think that's true domestically and certainly with countries around the world. I think it's a remarkable statement that all of that applies to that topic.
totally agree. Now, from the thud of ideas, here we are in September 1950. You're gonna,
So yeah, so we jump ahead 10 years, and now we're in the Truman administration. Some say, and these are critics that say, Democratic people don't know what they believe, but rather it is simply that they feel no strong urge to define what they instinctively comprehend. And the privileges of writing to the editor is basic. The product is the hot dish of scrambled eggs that is America. So this is the beginning of the Red Scare. We're at the beginning, well, we were into the first Red Scare, and we're at the beginning of McCarthyism.
and again, we have page numbers here, page 94 and then 96 through 97. If you have your book handy, if you want to look through, I know I highlighted things. So if you have anything you want to particularly share. I mean, he does mention a lot in here about writing a letter to the editor. I'm sure pretty much everyone on this group tonight has written a letter to the editor at some point in their lives. Anyone? No comment on this, huh? I just thought, well, I'll just share something. Oh, Jill has something. Okay, hang on. Jill Berry, please unmute. You just need you to.
So
unmute. There you go.
in that, on page 95, one of the things I really liked, misinformation, even when it is not deliberate, is at the bottom of much human misery. And that sort of gets back to sort of the speed of dissemination of information or ideas, whether they are true or false. That rang particularly true for me right now.
Sarah Ringer, did you have something you wanted to add?
That's pretty much what I wanted to say. I love the way he said that the Russian charge about us, which deliberately misleads many millions of people, should be met with a greatly expanded United States Department of Correction, Amplification, and Abuse. He's just so clever a wordsmith. But yeah, basically I wanted to say, make the same point that Jill made. I love this essay, by the way. I think this was my favorite of all the ones that I read. I thought he was really on point. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on this one? I just thought his use of language in this one was especially clever.
Yeah, I would just add, following the quote that Jill mentioned about misinformation is then at the end of that paragraph, he ties it into the damage done to a particular individual, the man pushing the cart.
I love that. I love the fact that, this is Liza, I love the fact that he illustrates his idea with a very concrete example of the man pushing the handcart. So if you had an inkling that you weren't quite sure of what the ramifications of this might be, it's that. the misinformation. I thought that was just wonderful to bring it down to that very concrete example. And then he goes back to, he brings it back in so that you can, again, I thought that was wonderful.
As someone brought up earlier, the pandemic that we're living through today, and not being moved by the impact it might have on others, your own behavior or misinformation.
So shall we move on to our next passage? Any other commentary? I think I got everyone. Okay, thank you. These have been great comments. Now one of my favorites, because I said we have to include some of his poetry, and this one is just a gasser from 1937. So
Yeah, and 1937 is an important year because it's the beginning of the end of Bo Carter's career. By this time, FDR had, I think, 3 investigations, federal investigations into Bo Carter.
you're going to share with us who Bo Carter was, right?
Well, he was a very important or very popular radio celebrity who would deliver the news in his own understanding of reality, sharing a lot of misinformation. Again, this kind of ties into the theme of misinformation. I really, until I read E.B. White's poem, I did not know Bo Carter, but he does remind me of the radio priest, Huey Long, others who use the radio to spread misinformation or hate, or who was that? I'm trying to remember the radio priest. His name is escaping me right now. But there were certainly those who were using, especially as the war was, well, this was lead up to the war, but in opposition to FDR's New Deal.
Yeah, he was known as Bo Croak Carter, and he was a radio personality that was so caustic back in the 30s that he got banned from the major news networks. So, we think that these kinds of things only happen now. Well, guess what? In the 1930s, this was happening as well. And radio was just becoming a really big deal, just like we have social medias, in everybody's, world. Well, so John, do you want to read some passages from this?
The
The
tired
radio
world-
priest was Charles Coughlin or Coughlin?
Coughlin.
Coughlin.
Yeah, the tired world is slowly swooning to Philco's automatic tuning. I close my eyes and through my head the legions of despair are led. I like to hear the deep, sharp croaking of Boke when he's really boking. What will do him in part is his loss of General Foods as a sponsor. Some things weren't too different in that the radio as networks today are worried about their sponsorship, and Boke was costing them General Food commercials.
Here he is. Here's Bo Carter with his little polka dot bow tie. And yeah, Georgia State University has a lot of great information on him. But doesn't he just appears to be that, he's kind of charming looking, yet a little bit, devious. So the rest of the poem continues.
Oh, twist the dual at the, that should probably be the dial at the end of day, and hear the prelude to decay. The philocolossal world dismay, the markets break, a fascist scare, 12 Roman priests are bombed at prayer, 100 G-men raid the, now this I tried to figure out what rhymes with scare, prayer, and would have been a raid of 100 G-men, but I couldn't come up with it. But I see my time is up, and so I say to you, cheerio. And again, I think E.B. White was saying that Bo Carter's time was up and saying to him, cheerio.
That was his made up name, by the way. He wasn't really Boke Carter. He made, he gave himself the name Boke. He was
100 G-men raid the lair, sorry.
Raid the Lair.
Lair.
There, or well, that I thought of, yeah.
That would work. Anybody else like this poem? I mean, I don't know. I thought this was so clever. And the whole, the thought about radio being so prevalent is, again, like what we have going on with social media. Sarah Ringer, would you like to share something?
I thought it was brilliant. I actually thought Bo Carter was a made up person and he was just using this, made up person to make the point. But I thought it was fiendishly clever use of words and rhyme. I just love it.
So glad so Boke lives on.
Yeah, so the
Yeah, here's a little more about him again, so that we know he didn't make him up.
Yes.
And that was an advertisement. He was trying to promote himself even further. Available for local sponsorship in the remaining few cities. Bo Carter, radio's columnist. He elucidates and analyzes the news. So
Fox News.
Disregard for the facts was beloved by listeners. I'm blown away. Thank you for this. Yikes.
yeah, and this is from a recent article you can find in JSTOR, I think actually on JSTOR Daily. This author, Erin Blakemore, I think doing these slides, I can thank Bo Carter for introducing me to Erin Blakemore. She sounds like a very interesting writer. You may want to check her out, but this article, before Rush Limbaugh, there was Bo Carter. And
Mhm.
I mean, he does look the part. Doesn't he look like right out of Hollywood casting? I mean, who would you pick? That guy right there.
Sure.
Sarah Ringer, you had something else you wanted to add? Oop, there you go. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Wouldn't it be fun to hear an actual recording of him?
Oh, you
There must be
can.
one.
You can. I didn't include it. That would have been a good idea. I didn't include it in this. That might have been a nice thing. But yeah, there are recordings of him. A lot of them, actually.
Okay, good. Maybe I'll check that out.
Google that.
Yeah, the archive at the university, see this for the image credit here, archive.org broadcasting. I can send these links to you following, but yeah, you can hear him. So
This is Liza. We just were watching a documentary on public television on the Hearst, on
Oh, I
William Randolph
want to see
Hearst.
that. Mhm.
And in Hearst's early days, he dueled with the Morning Journal and the World in New York. And it was all this, what they call yellow journalism. It talks about the origin of the term yellow journalism. And it really, this Bo Carter and then, the segue to current sort of either, Fox News or, extreme brash news that's fact light, makes me think even back to that. So this is not new. It just gets retreaded and repackaged generation after generation. There's always going to be somebody who's going to take an extreme side and be very charismatic about delivering it. It's a thing. I mean, it's something that's going to come up again and again. And I love the way White dealt with him in a very classy literary way.
Mhm.
Bedfellows, John.
yeah,
So sweet.
yeah, I want to come back to some of those thoughts. I think Bedfellows will give us a chance.
Right.
This is February of 1956, so this is an election year, to be early on in the election year. All writing slants the way a writer leans, and no man is born perpendicular. although many men are born upright. The beauty of the American free press, the reader must sift and sort and check and countercheck in order to find out what the score is. And finally, democracy is a society in which the unbeliever feels undisturbed and at home. My favorite of the three, although for various reasons I could pick any one of them, is the second one, where I think, again, going back to the idea of civics, I love the way he talks about the free press putting a responsibility or an obligation upon the reader, the citizen. But he certainly was an advocate of absolute free press. Later on in one of his other essays, he would warn that if you are a professed lover of liberty, but you want to put some limits on aspects of democracy, including the free press, you better be careful, because maybe you're not really, that you don't really have faith in liberty. So he had faith in liberty and allowing people to speak out regardless of what they were saying.
I will just quickly add the one thing that I really liked in this passage on page 122, on the second paragraph. Adlai Stevenson takes a view of criticism almost opposite to Harry Truman's. Writing in Harper's, Stevenson says, "I very well know that in many minds, criticism has today become an ugly word. It has become almost lèse-majesté. It conjures up pictures of insidious radicals hacking away at the very foundations of the American way of life." So if somebody has a opposing view, that's it. And the other reason I love that we mentioned Adlai Stevenson is because we have a Stevenson connection at Morven with Governor Minor's wife, Helen. So I love that this kind of brings it circle. If you come to Morven in the Governor's Gallery, get this little picture of Adlai Stevenson as well. Oh, Sarah, you have your hand up. What would you like to say?
I also really like this story, not least because I once owned a dachshund. But obviously, as a former academic librarian, I really like the passage about the free press. But what I really focused on was where some, and I'm paraphrasing, but he talks about how a person who, in that quote, he talks about an unbeliever, but I sort of read it as somebody who just doesn't fit in is made to feel, he says, not uncomfortable. And I really liked that notion that, it's, the United States is a big tent and everybody is welcome underneath it, is the way I interpreted it. And of course, we don't live up to that, but it's something good to aspire to. But I was really struck by that. I like the way he phrased that. Again, as Liza said at the start, he's a children's book writer. That's what he's mainly known for, I think. That's all I ever read by him prior to this. So it's very simple language that everybody can understand. Even a 6-year-old knows what uncomfortable means, and we don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. And I really liked the way he talked about that.
Bill Barry, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just following up with what Sarah was saying, and it was in this essay and in another one about the dissenter should, or the different should, feel comfortable and protected. And I think that is really an essence of what it means to be an American, is you don't have to conform. And in the previous, or where they're talking about the Russians having, absolute faith sort of imposed on them, is we have to work to make sure that all of our people fit into our belief of many people at the table.
Liza, did you have something to add?
I'm just going to layer on another layer of adulation for that consideration. There's a quotation on page 125, the concern of a democracy is that no honest man shall feel uncomfortable. I don't care who he is or how nutty he is.
That's
I love
great.
that because he's,
Nutty.
to me, he's acknowledging that, you know, everybody thinks the other person with the other point of view is nutty and or crazy, or you're out of your mind. We say it all the time. You are out of your mind. How can you think that? And we don't mean that. It's just we don't share that opinion. So I love the fact that he puts that in there and humanizes himself as the omniscient voice, as the guy in the bed with the dog and the books and the, you know.
Right. We do have the two final quotes here that we should, I guess, mention and continue the discussion from this, right, John?
Yeah, this, you know, he uses unbelievers in an essay where he's mixing from politics into faith. He's talking about Eisenhower and mandatory prayer. So it's really, he's using unbelievers in a way where it makes you wonder, is he talking about people who are of a different faith or people who, and he would finish by saying, democracy is itself a religious faith. So he blends the two in a really marvelous way. But here he's saying their well-being would be a test of our democracy. Their tranquility would be its proof, whether they be of a different faith or different political party or different political beliefs. So yeah, I would just to go back to the nutty point, he also uses the word silly when he's dealing with segregation, and he makes the comment that people are easier being unjust than being silly.
Hi, this is Carrie. Just another moment there on that page 124, the middle of it there. The Herald Tribune headed the story, "President says prayer is part of democracy." The implication in such a pronouncement emanating from the seat of government is that religious faith is a condition or even a precondition of the democratic life. This is just wrong. You know, how can we not adore such a simple, direct sentence? A president should pray whenever and wherever he feels like it. Most presidents have prayed hard and long, and some of them in desperation and agony. But I don't think a president should advertise prayer. That is a different thing, democracy, and so on. I love that. You know, it is said, you know, we all know this, it is said that when you look at polling, an agnostic or heavens, an atheist would be the least likely ever to be supported to be president of the United States. And one could list all the most despised of religiosities, but at the very bottom would be atheists and agnostics anyway. That was pretty gutsy and pretty fine, I thought. Thanks.
I put up
Yes.
the photograph of Andy, which he
Thank
was known
you.
as, Evie was known as Andy, Catherine and Fred, the dachshund, because he's mentioned in Bedfellows. And we have two more hands up here. Holly, would you like to unmute?
I'm reading from the Washington Post. Recent polling from Pew found that most Republicans think that being a Christian is central to America's national identity. So I don't think Democrats think that, but I don't know. I don't know if that's a change. It probably is. And then the other thing, this was written in 1956 when we were still saying the Lord's Prayer at the beginning of the school day. So,
I would say you have to put this in the context of the Cold War and distinguishing ourselves from the atheist communists, Soviets. And in 1954, just 2 years before this, the words "one nation under God" was added to the pledge during this time, distinguishing America from communist nations, or at least an attempt to do that.
Liza, you had something you wanted to add?
I was just going to actually, I was noticing this, there's a very long essay, and I'm assuming this was published in the New Yorker, but it just seemed much longer than the others. And I don't know if it's that he was ill and his thinking was slower and he had the whole part about Fred and so forth. But it just struck me as being particularly weighty and long. I was surprised. I don't know why that came to me, but it just did.
That's a really good point. Looking to see.
And I wonder how many readers at the time had the tenacity. They must have had more tenacity than current readers do, because even, really fascinating New Yorker articles don't go on, essays don't go on so long.
I have something. They used to go on
Right.
that long. In the old days, the New Yorker articles were long.
Enter,
We can't do
enter
it
the internet.
anymore. Yeah.
Okay, so what do we have next here? Another poem. John.
Okay, so again, this is Red Scare material, McCarthyism. Said Mr. A to Mr. B, I doubt the loyalty of C. Said Mr. C to Mr. A, I saw a funny thing today. At least it seemed quite odd to me. I saw F whispering with G, and I just caught the name of B. No, really? Answered A to C. Well, anyway, I don't know B. I guess it's just as well for me. And I know that last stanza, the I don't know B, just reminded me of Alger Hiss and Whitaker Chambers. And how suspicions obviously loop around. And but I think in this poem, E.B. White really nails the real danger of McCarthyism.
What I thought was so interesting about this is, he is a children's book writer, and it was totally Dr. Seuss that came to my mind.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it was a dig at Dr. Seuss or, what, because an in joke, but yeah. Any other?
It's an homage, I think.
Homage to Dr.
Homage to Dr. Seuss.
And I just looked up Bedfellows too. It was first published in the New Yorker, Liza. So it was called A Letter from the East. And it was published then. So, I mean, again, they can do long pieces in the New Yorker then.
Yes.
Well, and as Carrie pointed out on the chat, the long form continues to be an anchor for both the New Yorker, the Atlantic, some of the other magazines as well. But it's just is interesting to think about who was reading them and how many people today have the tenacity or the interest in reading long economists, those kinds of things, those really long articles.
Carrie, we have so many more distractions. Call them, I mean, that's a silly, simple word, but my goodness, all the bouncing and jumping from, that which is on social media to the television and to the newspapers. We have so much more, which is its burden, isn't it? And as well as its potential. It's such an extraordinarily different time, even as the underlying great big gigantic things like warring and chasms and divisiveness, the gigantic things remain, but the day in and day out stuff, our daily lives, if we care to inundate ours. I mean, I have, forgive me, I'll quickly finish. Here I am with my daily New York Times delivered and my weekly New Yorker, the Atlantic. There is so much, and there's more than we can almost absorb. So I loved pausing this way as we are with these going through these decades in this really beautifully written and charming. Anyway, I'll stop.
Well, and thank you for that. And you mentioned about burden, and I think burdens may be where we end, because we're already at 7:35, and I know, I don't know how much longer everyone wants to sit, but we're going into Unity, and then we go to burden. So this is from Unity. Here we are in 1960. John.
So this is the Nixon-Kennedy election coming up. Not until free men get up in the morning with the feeling that they too are on the march will the danger to Western society begin to subside. And our best missile, our ideas that make men's hearts catch fire. This, I think he was writing in response to a difficult summit with Khrushchev, wondering why the West is kind of kowtowing to the desires of the communist East. But I thought that, you know, the danger to Western society, which certainly is something is still felt in the world today, but the idea of free men get up in the morning with the feeling that they too are on the march. I love that idea. It also, though, made me think the people back in the poem on security, some of those felt that they were on the march against their neighbors. And again, that idea that we need to not make unwelcome those with who are in some ways different.
Great point. Reverses of Fortune. July 5th, 1976. Here we are. Bicentennial.
Yes, indeed. Day after. And here he's talking about the writings of John Adams and reminding us that some pretty difficult times have faced America, including right after her declaration. So that tough times have always been with us and they continue to be with us, right? So everywhere you look at the desolation and the melancholy scene, you find somebody busy with an antidote to melancholy, disease, misconduct, a tremendous desire to carry on against odds. And let not the reverses discourage us. Liberty is an animating cause. So here we really see that optimism. I think of E.B. White, that idea that liberty can be bring life to a people.
Liza has something.
And I think to me, what he's saying here is, again, as we have discussed, this is not the first time we have faced that our democracy has faced desolation, melancholy, so forth, and odds seemingly against us. And he, sort of the press on kind of a thing. And then here we are again now, all these years later, doing the same thing, saying it was true in John Adams' case, it was true in E.B. White's time, and now it's true in our time. And all we can do is press on and be upright and declare ourselves and educate ourselves and be responsive and responsible.
Yeah, I think, going back to the civics aspect in terms of obligation, I think here he's reminding citizens that they should be well-versed in our history, to know that they are not the first ones to go through these hard times. Liberty as an animating cause. Well, it was a cause somewhat different for 1776. They were fighting to obtain it. Now, liberty is an animating cause in that we possess it, and also want to cherish it. So it's a great words again from E.B. White.
Carrie put in the chat here that she LOVEs that in nearly 3.5 years, 4th of July, 2026, we have that fancy word semi-quincentennial. And I sent to her, stay tuned. Liza said too, stay tuned for Morven's activities. I said Morven's getting ready for that special celebration. So yeah, this is all leading up to that.
I think my arithmetic's wrong, but I'm counting on you guys doing all these wonderful things that are going around the country. Thank you.
You have it right. It is 2026. So thank you for that. And The Burden, the poem from Burdens of High Office, poem October 12th, 1963. Again, tough times in 1963.
Yeah, I mean, this is October of 1963. Everyone is remembering where they were a year earlier. This is perhaps a week shy of the Cuban Missile Crisis anniversary. So, you know, people would have been writing about what they had just lived through the year before. And yet again, E.B. White has this wonderful way of bringing it down to the personal. A president's work is never done. His burdens press from sun to sun. A Berlin Wall, a racial brew, tax cut bill a madam knew. One crisis ebbs, another flows, and here comes John with a runny nose. And while he's fending off our foes, bend down and wipe a little boy's nose. And of course, you know, we look at this poem today and know what will happen in November of 1963, that Kennedy is just a month away from the end of his presidency.
Letters. Now, if we have some time for this, we'll, I guess, quickly scoot through because you have some, yeah,
I
do we
would,
want to, or what do you think?
sure, I mean, whatever. I mean, I'd just make a few points and let everybody else chime in maybe just at the end on the ones that they want to comment on.
Yeah, let's quickly go through the letters, the little excerpts that you pulled out from Freedom of Choice, letter to the weekly packet. Here we are, July 2nd, 1964.
And this day was a historic day. This was the day that Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in this letter, he mentions that the Civil Rights Act is to protect the many from the whimsical conduct of the few. Right? So again, that idea that liberty is constrained by certain laws to protect the many. This one, labels are labels. This one I found really interesting. Labels are labels and they always turn up around election time. This is a midterm election that had just taken place 2 days before. There is only one kind of press that's any good, a press free from any taint of government control. And the taint that he's talking about is the fact that the Bangor Daily News, used the radical liberals label that was a favorite of Agnew's, Spiro Agnew. So the press, if the press starts using labels that are invented by one particular candidate or a particular party, he's saying, that press is not free from taint. So it was an interesting take, I thought, on his understanding of a free press. I would also say this is 1970, so you have the context of all of the turmoil with the anti-war protests on college campuses around the country. Which,
Liza, did you have something you wanted to add? Oh, sorry. You need to just unmute.
I just wanted to say that that again, we have the universality that the nature of this kind of a comment. It almost doesn't. It's regardless of which side is where and who's calling what label, but the fact they always turn up around election time and there is only one kind of press that's any, and that's free from the taint of government control. But also then again, in his very interesting and direct way, he specifically says, White specifically says, Vice President of the United States, his name is Spiro T. Agnew, and in a very soft voice, he has raised the specter of government supervision of the news. It's like at the end, girls and boys, it's just again, he's not railing, he's not stomping, he's not screaming. He's using a soft and comfortable voice, easy to listen to, and pointing out that Agnew is in a very soft voice, raising the devil here. So I just love the way he did that.
On Hope, letter to Mr. Nadeau.
Okay, Mr. Nadeau is just an average citizen who wrote about his despair in the midst of the Watergate scandal. And here again is a kind of a lesson for the obligations of citizenship as a contribution to order and steadfastness, right? Just hang on to your hat, hang on to your hope, and wind the clock, for tomorrow's another day. So that idea of doing the things that you do as your routine, right? That it's a contribution that all citizens should be making to the society.
We're going to wrap it up with,
Again, a Nixon generated quote or letter. If I just, one of the other thoughts I had going back to the one on personal liberty was the fact that E.B. White was writing to the weekly packet. I love that. Not just the Bangor Daily News, but a little weekly packet. So this one here, let the people speak and then count the votes. I think he mentions that that's something he hopes we always hold on to and cherish and never let go. Let's hope they are right, but don't bet on it.
bet on it.
And
He always has that little bit of sarcasm, that little bit of, just so clever. And like you all said, light-handed, he gets his point across, but he doesn't have to scream it.
right. And
Carrie typed in the chat, there were some remarks at the onset about what might EB think about today. We know. She has in big capital letters, we know.
you would have a lot to write about.
So does anyone
But
else
who was it that said, I may not agree with what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it?
That's a
Whoever
hard
said that,
rule.
that's really, I mean,
Voltaire
that's-
sometimes, they're different, different
yeah,
ones.
but that's really, for me, America. I mean, it's right there. I may not agree with you, but I'll fight for you to be able to say it. Yeah.
Yes.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add or what they feel civic duty is, or if they feel that they would, if you could sit down with E.B. White today, anything you'd like to ask him?
I think I would just listen. I'd be afraid to open my mouth. He's so eloquent.
So he's shy, so we would just read. We would read and read and read and lap it all up.
We could thank him.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Definitely. This has been.
Wouldn't
so
we love
great.
to have someone ask him, who would be the three, that whole thing they do and buy the book? Who would you want to sit down with and have dinner with and listen to? Don't know.
I know one of the people that E.B. White would definitely want to sit down with, and that would be his wife. He adored her. And so if there was ever
Thank
going to
you.
be any kind of a gathering, he would want her to be there. So that's an easy
Yeah.
one, but I don't know who the others would be.
Thanks for knowing that.
I would just say, on this last slide, we just have the date wrong. It was actually March of 75. Nixon had just resigned in August of 74. And that's the reason, don't bet on it.
Ah, okay. Thank you for that correction.
Thank you all.
Oh, great.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to stop the share for a minute because there we all are together. It should be
Yes.
that there we all are together. Hang on one second that I can see you all. Hang on. And can't see you all. There you are. Okay, so we have a little poll that I'm going to post up here. And can you see the poll? Can everyone see the poll?
No.
No.
No? Okay, well, I'm
No
gonna
poll.
launch it and now you'll see it. Here it comes.
Oh.
Okay, so the poll is, we are looking at 2 book selections for
Ah.
January, and you can choose one or the other. And by democracy here, we will vote on what our next book should be. The Soul of America by John Meacham or The American Experiment by David Rubenstein. So vote, 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 vote your heart, vote, vote, vote. And we will see what our January book will be. And it doesn't mean that we won't read the other one maybe in March, but it does mean this will be our next choice for January.
Well, we also have people that didn't that are listening to the recording. They didn't make it tonight. So
Right. So
they
this,
get to vote too.
Right, exactly. Everyone gets to vote who has signed up with a ticket. So they're all gonna get this, but let's see what tonight's vote. Ooh, it's 50-50. Okay,
Wow.
so that doesn't mean
Who will be
everyone-
the-
Democracy.
So our
Democracy.
absentee
for our
ballots
country.
get to make the determination. How prescient is that?
Well, I,
Or
On it,
truly
on it.
Democratic will flip a coin.
yeah, I abstained from voting and I don't know, John, did you vote? I don't know.
I didn't vote.
We didn't vote either. So, but yeah, we'll share this with everyone and I will email and let everyone know what the January book will be, but we are looking at, these two very carefully. And we wanted to see how tonight went before we made a final decision on the next two, but we're looking at
Post them
January.
again.
I'm sorry.
Post them again. I'm trying to write them down. John
Oh.
Meacham's is the soul of democracy.
Oh, it
Soul
still
of
should be
America.
up. It still should be up.
No, no, it's not.
Once you've answered, it goes
Oh,
away.
I voted.
Oh,
yeah.
once you, okay, so what, The Soul of America by
Yeah.
John Meacham and The American Experiment by David Rubenstein.
Okay, I got it.
So here, so I can end the poll and it should show you, okay, here's the results of the poll. Okay, so there was The Soul of America was the winner for
We have
today.
Meacham fans here.
Yep, Meacham fans. So that was the winner for tonight, but we'll see ultimately when I put it out there in a survey to everyone. Using democracy, and we'll see which one is for January. So we were planning, this was a series. John has delightfully agreed to host. So we're gonna do one meeting again in January, new year, new you. We get back in there with our thinking after the holidays. And in March, before we head into springtime, we'll have another meeting. So thank you all so much. I thought this was just great. I hope you all enjoyed it.
Maybe quick question. Do we think we'll be on Zoom or do we think we'll try it in person or we don't know yet?
For January, I could go either way. I'm hopeful that, Jill, what are you thinking?
I think we're gonna watch the science.
Okay,
Yeah.
so hold the thought that maybe we can be in person.
Yes.
Yeah,
but-
I mean,
But we know it can work.
Yes.
Zoom is great, and we don't have to go anywhere in a blizzard, and we
Well,
don't have to
that-
drive at night.
well, that's the
So,
wonderful thing about it. Like,
That's
let's
my
say-
vote.
Right, let's say
Okay.
we can't
We
do
can
it.
vote on that too.
We
I
can
want to,
vote on that
I want
too.
to Zoom it, and then we'll have a little tea party somewhere sometime.
Ah,
There
okay.
you go.
Well, thank you all again, and watch your emails for a link to the recording, but this was just great, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. And John, thank you so very much.
It was
Liza, thank
great.
you so much.
Well, Debbie,
Talk about
again, hearty congratulations, as Jill loves to point out, what came right out of the committee, part of our strategic plan, answering all the questions we need to answer, and getting all of our ducks in a row. And thank you for doing that, Debbie. And John, thank you so much for your able guidance through the discussion. And obviously you have great classroom skills.
Thank you.
Yes, it was great.
Now you have a
Yeah.
fan club.
That's right. That's right. He already does, but they're all like 18 years old. Thanks so much, everyone.
Night,
It was
everyone.
so great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night.
so
Thank you
much.
for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Bye.